Attention is the most powerful resource you possess, yet it is often the most mismanaged. Unlike money, time, or physical energy, attention determines how all other resources are used. Wherever your attention goes, your energy follows, and wherever your energy flows, results are produced. This means your life is not shaped merely by what happens to you, but by what you consistently give your focus to. Many people underestimate this principle and unknowingly give their attention away to things that drain them rather than develop them. When dealing with a narcissist, this becomes even more dangerous because their entire influence depends on capturing and controlling your attention. They do not need to physically be present to affect you. If they occupy your thoughts, they still have access to your energy. That is why you may find yourself replaying conversations, analyzing their behavior, or questioning your own worth long after the relationship has changed or ended. What you must understand is that attention is not passive. It is an active investment. Every thought you entertain is a seed planted in your mind. If you continuously think about the narcissist, you are watering a cycle that keeps you emotionally attached. You may believe you are trying to understand, but in reality, you are reinforcing the connection. The more attention you give, the stronger the influence becomes. This is why discipline over your attention is essential. You cannot afford to be careless with what occupies your mind. Just as a wise person would not invest money into something that guarantees loss, you must not invest your attention into thoughts that produce confusion, frustration, and emotional instability. You have to become intentional about where your focus goes. Redirecting your attention is not always easy, especially when emotional wounds are involved. Your mind may naturally return to what hurt you because it is trying to make sense of the experience. However, healing does not come from endless analysis. It comes from purposeful redirection. Instead of asking why they behaved the way they did, begin asking what you need to learn, how you need to grow, and what kind of life you want to build moving forward. You must also recognize that attention shapes identity. If your focus is constantly on someone else's actions, you begin to lose sight of your own values, goals, and direction. Over time, your sense of self becomes blurred, and you may find yourself reacting instead of creating, surviving instead of thriving. But when you reclaim your attention and direct it toward your growth, something powerful happens. You begin to rebuild your identity with clarity and intention. Guarding your attention also means setting mental boundaries. Just as you would protect your physical space from harmful influences, you must protect your mental space from intrusive thoughts that do not serve your well-being. This may require you to limit exposure to reminders, conversations, or environments that trigger old patterns. It may require you to consciously interrupt negative thought cycles and replace them with thoughts that align with your growth. There is also a deeper level to this principle. Attention determines your future. What you consistently focus on today becomes the foundation of your tomorrow. If your attention remains fixed on past pain, you will continue to relive it in different forms. But if your attention is directed toward growth, purpose, and self-development, you begin to create a future that reflects those priorities. You are not powerless in this process. You have the ability to choose what deserves your attention. You have the authority to decide what thoughts you will entertain and which ones you will dismiss. This is not about ignoring reality. It is about choosing what you will give power to. The moment you understand that your attention is valuable, you will stop giving it away so easily. You will become more selective, more intentional, and more disciplined. You will begin to invest your focus into things that build you rather than break you. And as you do this consistently, you will notice a shift, not just in how you think, but in how you live. Because ultimately, your attention is shaping your life, whether you realize it or not. The question is not whether you are using it. The question is whether you are using it wisely. You cannot heal while studying the one who hurt you, because healing and obsession require two completely different directions of focus. One pulls you inward toward restoration, while the other keeps you outward, locked into analysis, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. Many people believe that if they can just understand the narcissist deeply enough, if they can decode every action, every inconsistency, every contradiction, they will finally find peace. But what they don't realize is that this constant analysis is the very thing delaying their healing. The human mind seeks closure. It wants answers. It wants to make sense of pain. But not all situations offer clean explanations, especially when you are dealing with someone whose behavior is rooted in manipulation, control, and emotional inconsistency. Trying to fully understand such a person is like trying to build a solid structure on unstable ground. The more effort you put into it, the more frustrated and drained you become, because the foundation itself is unreliable. Every moment you spend replaying conversations, dissecting their words, or questioning their intentions is a moment you are investing your energy in the wrong place. And energy is not unlimited. What you give your energy to grows. So if you continue to give your energy to analyzing the narcissist, you are unknowingly strengthening your emotional attachment to the very source of your pain. Healing, on the other hand, requires redirection. It requires you to shift from "why did they do this?" to "what do I need now?" That shift may seem simple, but it is powerful. Because the first question keeps you tied to them, while the second question brings you back to yourself. And everything about your restoration begins when you return to yourself. There is also a deeper truth that must be understood. Understanding their behavior will not undo the damage it caused. You can become an expert in their patterns, their tactics, and their personality, and still feel empty, confused, or hurt. Knowledge alone does not heal emotional wounds. Healing comes from processing your own emotions, rebuilding your self-worth, and creating new patterns that support your well-being. When you study the one who hurt you, you stay mentally connected to them. Even in their absence, they occupy your thoughts. They influence your emotions. They dictate your mental space. And that is a form of control. It may not be physical, but it is psychological. True freedom is not just about physical distance. It is about mental and emotional release. You must also recognize that constantly analyzing them keeps you in a state of reaction rather than intention. Your thoughts revolve around what they did, how they behaved, and what it meant. But your life was never meant to be a reaction to someone else's dysfunction. Your life was meant to be driven by purpose, clarity, and direction. And you cannot access that level of clarity if your mind is constantly occupied with someone else's behavior. There comes a point where you have to accept that not everything will make sense, and that's okay. Closure does not always come from answers. Sometimes it comes from acceptance. Acceptance that what happened was real. Acceptance that it affected you. An acceptance that you deserve to move forward, even without fully understanding why it happened the way it did. When you release the need to study them, you create space. Space to think clearly. Space to feel honestly. Space to rebuild intentionally. And in that space, something powerful begins to happen. You start to reconnect with yourself. Your thoughts become your own again. Your emotions become clearer. Your decisions become more aligned with your well-being. This is where true healing begins. Not when you have all the answers about them, but when you start asking better questions about yourself. What do you need to feel whole again? What boundaries do you need to establish? What patterns do you need to break? What kind of life do you want to build moving forward? The moment you shift your focus from them to yourself, you take back your power. You stop feeding the past and start investing in your future. You stop trying to solve a puzzle that was never meant to be solved, and instead you begin building a life that is stable, meaningful, and aligned with who you truly are. And that is the turning point when you realize that healing is not found in understanding them, but in rediscovering yourself. Self-focus has been misunderstood for far too long, often labeled as selfishness by people who benefit from your neglect of yourself. But there is a critical distinction that must be understood if you are going to grow. Selfishness takes from others to satisfy self, while self-focus develops self so you can live with clarity, strength, and purpose. One is rooted in insecurity, the other is rooted in responsibility. When you have been involved with a narcissist, your sense of focus is often distorted. You were trained, whether subtly or overtly, to prioritize their needs, their emotions, their reactions, and their expectations. Over time, you may have lost touch with your own desires, your own voice, and your own direction. So when you begin to shift your attention back to yourself, It can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. That discomfort is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that you are breaking a pattern that was never meant to define you. You must understand that your life is your primary assignment. No one else has been given the responsibility to manage your thoughts, your growth, your healing, or your purpose. If you abandon yourself in the name of keeping peace with others, you will eventually lose both, yourself and your peace. Self-focus is the act of returning to that responsibility with intention. Consider this. Every moment you spend analyzing the narcissist is a moment you are not investing in your own development. Every ounce of emotional energy spent trying to understand their behavior is energy that could have been used to strengthen your mindset, rebuild your confidence, and clarify your direction. Growth requires energy, and energy is limited. You cannot afford to waste it on cycles that do not produce progress. Self-focus also requires honesty. It demands that you ask yourself difficult questions. What did I tolerate that I should not have tolerated? Where did I ignore my own needs? What patterns do I need to break so I never return to this place again? These questions are not meant to shame you. They are meant to empower you, because awareness is the foundation of transformation. When you become aware, you gain the ability to make different choices. There is also a discipline that comes with focusing on yourself. It is not simply about thinking differently. It is about living differently. It is about creating boundaries where there were none. It is about saying no when you used to say yes out of fear. It is about choosing growth over comfort, even when it feels challenging. Self-focus is not a passive state. It is an active commitment to becoming better. You must also recognize that focusing on yourself does not mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop neglecting yourself. It means your care is no longer one-sided. It becomes balanced, healthy, and sustainable. When you're whole, your relationships improve. Not because you are giving more, but because you are giving from a place of strength rather than depletion. Another important aspect is identity. When you focus on yourself, you begin to rediscover who you are without external influence. You begin to reconnect with your values, your passions, your standards, and your vision for your life. You stop defining yourself by how someone treated you, and you start defining yourself by who you are becoming. That shift is powerful because it moves you from being a victim of circumstance to being the author of your future. Understand this clearly. No one benefits when you abandon yourself, not even you. The world does not need more people who are drained, confused, and disconnected from their purpose. The world needs individuals who are grounded, self-aware, and intentional. That begins with you choosing to focus on yourself, not as an act of isolation, but as an act of preparation. When you make that choice consistently, something begins to change within you. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions become more stable. Your decisions become more intentional. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop chasing validation and start building value. And in that process, you don't just recover from what you experienced, you evolve beyond it. So do not apologize for focusing on yourself. Do not feel guilty for prioritizing your growth. You are not abandoning others. You are finally refusing to abandon yourself. And that decision is not only necessary, it is transformative. Your identity is one of the most powerful assets you possess. Yet it is also one of the most attacked when you encounter a narcissistic personality. The reason is simple. Control begins with distortion. If someone can confuse you about who you are, they can influence how you think, how you feel, and ultimately how you behave. Over time, you may have found yourself questioning your worth, second-guessing your decisions, or even shrinking parts of yourself just to maintain peace. But that version of you was not your original design. It was a response to pressure, not a reflection of truth. You must understand that identity is not something that is given to you by people. It is something that is discovered within you. It is shaped by your values, your beliefs, your purpose, and your vision for your life. When you allow another person to define that for you, you hand over the authority of your life. And once that authority is misplaced, confusion becomes inevitable. You start living according to their expectations instead of your own assignment. A narcissist often projects their insecurities onto others. They may label you in ways that diminish your confidence, too sensitive, too emotional, not good enough, or even difficult to love. But those labels were never a diagnosis. They were a strategy. If they could make you doubt yourself, they could maintain control over you. So the first step in reclaiming your identity is to reject every false label that was placed on you. Not emotionally, but intellectually. You must challenge those narratives with truth. Ask yourself, who were you before the confusion began? What were your passions, your strengths, your natural inclinations? There was a version of you that existed before the manipulation, a version that was confident, curious, and expressive. That person is not gone. They are simply buried under layers of doubt that were never meant to stay. Your responsibility is to uncover that person again. Rebuilding your identity requires intentional effort. It is not enough to walk away physically. You must also detach mentally. This means you stop filtering your decisions through the lens of what would they think or how would they react. So time is satisfied. That mental habit is a residue of control and it must be broken. You are not accountable to their perception of you. You are accountable to your purpose. You must also begin to redefine your self-image based on truth, not experience alone. Just because you were treated a certain way does not mean you deserved it, and it certainly does not define your value. Your value is intrinsic. It is not something that fluctuates based on someone else's behavior. When you internalize that, your confidence begins to stabilize. You are no longer easily shaken by opinions because you are rooted in understanding. Another critical aspect of reclaiming your identity is setting boundaries. Boundaries are not just physical, they are psychological. They determine what you accept, what you reject, and what you allow to influence your thinking. When your identity is unclear, your boundaries are weak. But when you know who you are, you become selective. You no longer entertain conversations, environments, or relationships that contradict your growth. It is also important to recognize that rediscovering your identity is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to who you were always meant to be. Growth is not addition, it is alignment. You align your actions with your values, your thoughts with truth, and your life with purpose. And in that alignment, you begin to experience clarity. There will be moments where you feel uncertain, and that is part of the process. Identity reconstruction takes time because it requires unlearning before relearning. But every step you take towards self-awareness strengthens your foundation. Every decision you make for yourself reinforces your independence. And every moment you choose truth over confusion, you reclaim a part of yourself that was once compromised. You were never created to live as a reflection of someone else's dysfunction. You were created with intention, with capability, and with purpose. The moment you accept that, you stop seeking validation from external sources and start building confidence from within. And when your identity is rooted internally, it becomes unshakable, no matter who comes or goes in your life. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood because people associate it with indifference or emotional coldness, but that is not what it truly represents. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the mastery of feeling. It is the ability to experience emotions without allowing those emotions to control your decisions, distort your perception, or define your worth. When you have been entangled with a narcissist, your emotional system has likely been conditioned to react, to overanalyze, and to seek validation from someone who was never stable enough to provide it. Detachment becomes necessary because it breaks that conditioning at its root. You must understand that clarity does not come from emotional chaos. It comes from emotional order. When you're constantly reacting to someone's manipulation, inconsistency, or emotional unpredictability, your mind becomes clouded. You begin to question your reality. You begin to doubt your instincts. You begin to lose your sense of direction. Emotional detachment restores that order. It allows you to step back and see things as they truly are, not as you feel them in moments of emotional intensity. Detachment is the decision to no longer internalize what was never yours to carry. A narcissist projects, manipulates, and transfers their internal instability onto others. If you are not careful, you will begin to carry their confusion as if it belongs to you. But the moment you detach, you create a boundary between what is yours and what is not. You begin to recognize that their behavior is a reflection of their internal state, not a measure of your value. There is a powerful shift that occurs when you learn to observe without absorbing. You start to notice patterns without being pulled into them. You start to recognize manipulation without reacting to it. You begin to respond with intention instead of reacting out of habit. This is where clarity is born. Clarity is not something you chase. It is something that emerges when emotional noise is removed. Many people resist detachment because they fear losing connection. They believe that if they stop feeling so deeply, they will become disconnected from others or from themselves. But the opposite is true. When you detach from unhealthy emotional entanglements, you create space for genuine connection. Connection that is not based on control, fear, or dependency. You also reconnect with yourself in a way that is grounded, stable, and authentic. Detachment requires discipline because your mind will try to pull you back into old patterns. You may feel the urge to check on them, to think about what they are doing, or to replay past conversations in an attempt to find closure. But closure does not come from them. It comes from your decision to release the need for answers that will never satisfy you. Detachment is the moment you accept that not everything needs to be understood in order to be released. It is also important to recognize that detachment is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. Every day, you must choose where your focus goes. Every day, you must decide whether you will engage with thoughts that drain you or thoughts that build you. Every day, you must reinforce the boundary between your peace and their chaos. Over time, this practice strengthens your emotional independence. As you continue to detach, something remarkable begins to happen. Your perspective shifts. What once confused you becomes obvious. What once hurt you begins to lose its power. What once controlled your thoughts no longer has authority over your mind. You begin to see the situation for what it truly was, without the distortion of emotional attachment. And in that clarity, you find freedom. Not because the narcissist changed, but because you did. You stopped participating in a dynamic that required your emotional investment to survive. You reclaimed your attention, your energy, and your peace. That is the power of emotional detachment. It does not just protect you, it transforms you. Your purpose is not a side project, it is the central assignment of your life. Yet many people unknowingly delay or even abandon that assignment because their attention is divided. They are physically moving forward, but mentally they are still tied to the past. Still replaying conversations, still analyzing behaviors, still trying to make sense of someone who was never committed to making sense. And the danger in this is not just emotional exhaustion. The real danger is that distraction quietly steals time, and time is the one resource you can never recover. When your focus is split, your effectiveness is weakened. You cannot fully build, fully grow, or fully step into your potential while part of your energy is being consumed by something that no longer serves your future. This is why focusing on yourself is not just a suggestion, it is a requirement for progress. Anything that divides your attention will dilute your impact. You must understand that purpose demands concentration. It requires clarity of thought, emotional stability, and intentional action. But if your mind is constantly drifting back to what someone did to you, what they said about you, or how they treated you, then you are investing mental energy into something that produces no return. That is not just unproductive, it is costly. There is a principle you need to adopt. Wherever your attention goes, your life follows. If your attention is fixed on pain, your life will reflect that pain. If your attention is fixed on growth, your life will begin to expand in that direction. This is why you must become disciplined with your focus. Discipline is not just about what you do. It is about what you allow yourself to think about. Your future cannot compete with your past for attention. If you keep giving the past equal or greater focus, it will always feel more powerful than your future. But the truth is, your future holds far more potential. It simply requires your full presence to develop it. You cannot step into new opportunities while emotionally anchored to old experiences. Another reality you must accept is that your purpose will never chase you. You must pursue it. And pursuit requires energy, intention, and consistency. But if your emotional energy is tied up in resentment, confusion, or lingering attachment, then you will find yourself too drained to pursue what truly matters. This is why letting go is not just about peace. It is about positioning yourself for progress. You were not created to spend your life studying dysfunction. You were created to produce, to build, to grow, and to contribute. Every moment you spend overanalyzing someone who has already shown you their nature is a moment you are not investing in your own development. And over time, those moments accumulate into missed opportunities. It is also important to recognize that focus is a decision, not a feeling. You may not always feel ready to let go. You may not always feel motivated to shift your attention. But growth does not wait for feelings. It responds to decisions. The moment you decide that your life deserves your full attention, you begin to regain control. When you start focusing on yourself, something powerful happens. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions become more stable. Your actions become more intentional. And gradually you begin to see progress. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because your energy is finally being directed toward something productive. You must also develop the ability to redirect your mind. When thoughts of the narcissist arise, and they will, you cannot entertain them. You must train yourself to shift your focus back to your goals, your growth, and your responsibilities. This is not denial, it is discipline. It is choosing to invest your mental energy where it can actually produce results. Your purpose is too important to be treated as an afterthought. It requires your full attention, your full commitment, and your full presence. And the truth is, no one else can give that to your life but you. No one else can build your future. No one else can fulfill your potential. So you must reach a point where you value your destiny more than your distractions, where you prioritize your growth over your curiosity about someone else's behavior, where you become so focused on building your life that anything that does not contribute to that vision naturally loses its place in your mind. Because in the end, the quality of your life will not be determined by what someone did to you. It will be determined by what you chose to focus on after it happened. And if you choose to focus fully on your purpose, you will not just recover from the past, you will outgrow it completely.